Welcome to the Gen Z Marketer podcast, where we have marketing conversations and everything in between. In this episode, let's look into the next generations after the millennials, Generation Z and Generation Alpha. This episode is a part of the MarkeThoughts series, where I will share with you some of my thoughts and ideas on different topics and issues relevant to the industry. But before we get started, you'd want to perk yourself up while listening to this episode. Get your caffeine fix from Coffee Blends. Their coffee is sourced from local farmers here in the Philippines. You can get their coffee in tea bags in macadamia, hazelnut, double chocolate, and vanilla. Or you can brew your own coffee with their coffee grounds. Visit them on Facebook and Instagram at Coffee Blends or shop at bit.ly/coffeeblends. Now, let's get to it. As marketers, we now know millennials well enough. In the past few years, there were a lot of studies about them, understanding them, and learning their behaviors. We have now since adapted to them and know now and understand them well enough to know how to market to them. Now let's take a look at the next in line, which are Generation Z and Generation Alpha. Generation Z are those who are born in between 1996 to 2010. As we know, they are the successors of millennials. They are now considered the largest generation with a population estimated at 2 billion worldwide. They do have some similarities with millennials, but one of the key differences is that this generation are digital natives, while millennials are the generation in between or the transition generation to a more digital world. They mirror millennials when it comes to social and political issues, but are less optimistic. For instance, they are very anxious when it comes to climate change. Greta Thunberg is a known personality who is a part of Gen Z who inspired a movement to fight climate change. Gen Z really sees climate change as a crisis that needs to be resolved, and they really want to save the planet. Gen Z is also very entrepreneurial. They have ideas and believe that they have what it takes to be successful. They are very idealistic, unlike millennials who are more pragmatic. How about their relationship with brands? Gen Z, like millennials, value authenticity from brands. They are more inclined to see through brands who are not being transparent or authentic. They also value being independent and respond well to brands that help them build their own identities. They do not want to be defined by preconceived identities or stereotypes. Some brands think that Gen Z has no brand loyalty, and this is not necessarily true. Sure, Gen Z tends to shop from different brands and platforms, but they could be loyal. The key is to really gain their trust, be authentic and transparent, and provide them with a great overall experience. Value and quality is key to win Gen Z over. What about Generation Alpha? Generation Alpha are those who are born from 2011 onwards. These are the current generation of children aged 10 and below. The parents of Generation Alpha are millennials, and this generation is still very young, but they are already differentiating themselves from their predecessor, Gen Z. Most of Generation Alpha are exposed to digital screens like tablets and phones at their young age. For instance, if you ask kids from their generation what they do online, they'd probably tell you that they play games or watch YouTube and Netflix. One of the popular YouTube personalities now is Ryan of Ryan's World. He reviews toys in his channel and holds the title of highest paid YouTuber. Imagine at 9 years old, he's already earning millions. At 9 years old, he has his own following of kids who follow him and his content. The previous generations, at 9 years old, consume content differently. They are not as digitally immersed as this generation. Since Generation Alpha is still so young, not all brands would find them relevant to their business. But for some industries, studying this new generation is relevant. This generation, like their predecessor, have influence in purchasing decisions made by their parents for their household. Brands should really prepare themselves for these upcoming generations. Gen Z, in particular, are slowly entering the workforce and gaining spending power. Is your brand ready for them? Are you relevant to them? Meanwhile, there's so much to learn about Generation Alpha since they are just growing. But for some businesses, you may really need to start looking at them now. What are your thoughts on these generations? Hopefully, this episode helped you reflect about them and maybe you have new ideas or insights about this generation. If you want to share some thoughts, collaborate, or have topic suggestions, leave me a message in our socials at the Gen Z Marketer Podcast on Facebook, at Gen Z MKT on Instagram, and at anchor.fm/GenZMKT.